Man, oh man, do I have some silly stuff to show y'all. What up, you nerds? My name is Fallout, and I'm very tired, and today we're going to go over some of the wilder artifact mods available in the current artifact that we have out here in the Edge of Fate. Yes, I tested everything, so you don't have to. Granted, you probably weren't going to anyway, and it's easier than ever now with the in-game firing range, but still. I'm going to go over each perk quickly, and I will include timestamps for each row, so you can jump around if you want. While I'm definitely a big fan of something in column 3, my absolute favorite perk, aka one I think is kind of dummy strong, is in column 4. See if you can guess which one it is before we get there. Okay, we can mostly forget about column 1 because that's all anti-champion stuff. I will point out, however, that the brand new exotic scout rifle 3rd iteration is apparently bugged and doing more damage than it's supposed to if you have anti-barrier scout turned on in your artifact. Bungie knows this, and a fix will be implemented, quote, in the future. So until that happens, feel free to abuse the hell out of this exotic. It is really strong right now. Moving on to column 2, and mostly tame stuff here. Flame, Fiber, and Freeze is very self-explanatory. Combines together Solar and Strand into one Siphon mod, and same thing for Solar and Stasis. Depending on what weapons you like to use, this could be a very good helmet mod for a lot of your builds. The Unloved, Agape, Lost Signal, Tenacious Mastery, plenty of great weapons that fall under the umbrella of those 3 particular elements, so make sure you have that on if you're rocking a Solar and either Strand or Stasis weapon combo. Diviner's Discount is one we've had before and also fine. Takes the energy cost of scavenger mods on your leg armor and takes them from costing 3 energy down to 1 energy apiece. Not really insane, but not bad. One with Frost I think is pretty self-explanatory, and it pairs well together with some mods we'll cover in just a little bit. Tightly Woven gives you increased class ability and grenade stats when you have Woven Mail. The amount of energy Tightly Woven gives you is not out of this world, but if you have a build where you're applying Woven Mail to yourself a lot, then yeah, definitely use it. Tightly Woven is a good example of what most of this artifact offers overall. Decent perks that are constantly working for you in the background. It's like a slow cooker making a roast in your kitchen. You just kind of set it and forget it. Anyway, Rapid Precision Rifling is fine if you use scout rifles a lot, and it has 2 levels, by the way. The activation happens kind of quickly too. The number of shots it takes to proc the perk depends on the frame of the scout rifle, but no matter what frame you use, it happens kind of quickly. I wouldn't sweat it too much, and definitely be sure to use that perk if you're using the 3rd iteration a lot. All right, column 3, and here's where things start to get spicy. Fever and Chill. This is probably my favorite perk in column 3 right now. Rapid precision hits with solar weapons grant Radiant. Rapid precision hits with stasis weapons grant Frost armor. Aside from one perk we'll get to in column 4, never before have I seen so much rewarded for so little effort. This perk is strong, especially if you have a solar or stasis weapon you already enjoy using. I found that the activation criteria depends on the kind of weapon you have, although even then things do get weird. For example, the Nullify Pulse Rifle takes 4 pulls of the trigger to get Radiant to turn on, but for some reason, the Agape Hand Cannon only takes 2. Yes, pull the trigger 2 times, aka fire 4 bullets total, and you are now Radiant for free. I found that odd because even though one is a hand cannon and one is a pulse rifle, they're both heavy burst weapons, but oh well. Good news is I already enjoy the Agape Hand Cannon, now I like it even more. I've always been a big fan of Ember of Torches on my Solar Warlock, but with Fever and Chill, I honestly feel like I don't need it. It rewards me and gives me free Radiant for playing the game no differently than I normally would. Moving on, the other perks in column 3 are still respectable. Elemental Benevolence is nice. In testing, I found it to be nowhere near as good as Ember of Benevolence, mind you, but that's one of the most busted fragments to ever exist, so kind of a high bar there. That being said, if you're a Hunter main and you enjoy using Ascension, then you should probably have Elemental Benevolence permanently turned on. Next up, we have Frost Renewal, and this is a perk that should basically be mandatory if you use any kind of build that gives you Frost armor on the regular, or if you rock Fever and Chill with a stasis weapon. In short, when you take critical damage, aka when you go from white to red health, Your Guardian will release a freezing burst and grants frost armor to you and nearby allies. As you can imagine, this is very strong when it activates. The radius was also noticeably more generous than I was expecting. Don't really need to explain much more beyond that. It is pretty good and you don't have to think about it, so yay. Reciprocal Draw is kind of a weird one. Rapid non-sidearm final blows grant sidearms a period of increased damage for a short time upon next draw. Basically, get a bunch of kills with any weapon that is not a sidearm, and then the game will tell you that Reciprocal Draw is ready to go, and then you whip out a sidearm and it'll do 35% more damage for the next 5 seconds. It doesn't take too many kills to proc. With a hand cannon in the firing range, it was taking me about 3 kills to proc the perk, which is not too bad. Also, take note that little message that says Reciprocal Draw ready. Yeah, apparently that doesn't go away, meaning whenever you've primed the perk, it'll stay ready to go until you eventually take your sidearm out, which is pretty nice. And overall, a great perk if you like sidearms, and hey, who doesn't like rocket frame sidearms? It also works in PvP apparently, but the damage buff seems to be way toned down, so I'm not that worried about it. Refresh threads was one that actually surprised me. If you pick up an elemental pickup that matches your subclass element or a tangle when you have a strand super, you get energy to your least charged ability. The amount of energy you get, I believe, depends on if it's either your grenade, melee, or class ability that is getting charged up, and your current armor value for that stat. But you can get respectable chunks right away when the perk procs. As you see right here, I grab a fire sprite and my grenade energy goes up a fair bit. TLDR, don't sleep on refresh threads, works on more than just strand and pairs well with elemental coalescence, which we'll get to later. All right, column 4, and we got Threaded Blast. This is not a new artifact perk. We've had it before and it's just as good now as it was then. As you can see here, before I turn the artifact perk on, when I detonate the tangle, the nearby enemies aren't even within range to be affected. Then, when I turn on Threaded Blast, now the nearby hive are well within range. Use it for sure if you play Strand and have a lot of tangles on the field. Conerized Darkness is kind of a miss for me, mainly because even though you can get extra damage output, which is cool, it only works on non-boss enemies. Lame. In short, find an enemy that's been debuffed with stasis or strand, and any solar damage you throw at them will hit 30% harder. That's a lot of damage, sounds really good, but again, only on non-boss enemies, so kinda depends on your build and your activity. Elemental Daze is very passive but nice if you're in an activity with a lot of champions. Stun a champion, and whatever the element of the weapon you stunned him with, that will create an explosion of that element, and you'll hit nearby enemies with a matching elemental debuff. Basically, if you stun a champ with an arc weapon, you'll jolt nearby enemies. Stun a champ with a solar weapon, you'll make an ignition. You get the idea. Next though, we got my favorite perk on the whole damn artifact, and that is Shoulder to Shoulder. Dealing sustained precision damage against combatants while near 2 or more allies grants you damage resist. Basically, if you got 2 buddies near you while you are dealing crit damage, then you get damage resist times 2, which last I checked is 25%. And your allies don't even really need to be that close to you. As long as they're within 15 meters, the perk will activate. And as long as you're continuously dealing crit damage, the perk will auto refresh. Just be nearest to 2 allies, land a few crits on an enemy, and a free 25% DR is your reward. Good God. I know that reading the perk makes you think, oh, this would be really good for a DPS phase, especially if you're dealing crit damage or whatever. But really, 15 meters is so generous, you can just take advantage of this in the neutral game. But yeah, also good for potential DPS phases. Take it with you into the day 1 raid race this weekend. It's really good. I can't believe they made it so easy to benefit from. Moving on, Elemental Coalescence has a chance to have you make an elemental pickup. I tested it a bunch and feel like this does proc anywhere between 11 and 25% of the time, somewhere in there. I feel like 25% is kind of the high end. It'll probably be closer to like 15 or 20%. But yeah, free elemental pickups. Not incredibly sexy, but good. good. And finally, we get to column 5. Radiant Shrapnel is very silly. In a good way though. Deal sustained weapon damage while radiant or defeating a scorched combatant with a weapon, and the target will release solar projectiles that deal damage and scorch on impact. Now, respectfully, some of these shrapnel shards gotta go back to school, because about a third of the time they just drift off or they miss their target. I don't know what the fuck they're doing. They're chasing after nothing, but most of the time, this perk is insanely free ad clear, and I recommend it a lot. It is very satisfying to watch it unfold in the background and help you mop up enemies for free. Next up, we have a returning favorite, Shield Crush. I do think this perk is slightly less good now in Edge of Fate due to the fact that Bungie changed how melee damage works. TLDR, it's additive, not multiplicative. At the end of the day though, you're still potentially buffing your outgoing melee damage by 50% when you have the perk procced, and your outgoing grenade damage by 25%, as long as you can keep up some elemental buffs, which really ain't that hard to do. Still a very good perk overall. Next, we have Elemental Overdrive. Picking up an elemental pickup or tangle grants increased damage to weapons of the same element. Even though the buff only clocks in at 10% more weapon damage, this is insanely free, especially when paired with Elemental Coalescence. Yeah, 10%, but free damage is free damage, and you should use that if you make a lot of elemental pickups. Tangled Web is awesome if you play a lot of Strand and make a lot of tangles via Strand debuffed enemies. Nothing too complicated, you just get a free suspend, which remember, Bungie increased the overall duration by 1 second in the Edge of Fate. Finally, we come to Frigid Glare, and if you're using either Fever and Chill with a stasis weapon or a build that gives you a lot of frost armor on the regular, this is a mandatory perk for you. When you got frost armor, a precision final blow will cause a freezing burst. Definitely way stronger in ad dense activities, but yeah, really good and with a respectable radius. Again, depending on your loadout and your weapon selection overall, there's pretty much no reason to not use this if you have frost armor a lot. And there you go. Hope that wasn't too long. Lots of interesting new options, and yeah, my favorites at the moment are Fever and Chill, Refresh Threads, Shoulder to Shoulder by a lot, Elemental Coalescence, Radiant Shrapnel, Shield Crush, Elemental Overdrive, and Frigid Glare. I hope you understand them a little better now and maybe can make some more interesting builds for the day 1 raid. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.